Could I build and manage my own zoo all from the ground up? The number of visitors and profits, picking out the weirdest endangered animals, and having to deal with all of its downfalls, like plenty of them. And finally seeing if my zoo can survive something called the neglect. Anyways, I'll be spending my first 25 years building a zoo in Panda Zoo. But like anyone else, we first have to start with the paths. In a rather rainy start to our zoo, we made and laid down the first foundations of our park, totally not following like a best Panda Zoo layout guide or anything. Anyways, after messing with the length and width of the road, I ended up with this square, which is perfect enough for us to fit the necessary facilities to house our staffs, and also keeping them far enough to not negatively impact our guests, which we can see using this heat map. In this game, all our staff work under these things called the work zones, which basically covers all their access to each facility or habitat, so we quickly made one with the name Zoo. I know, original. Hired our first few staffs and assigned them to the work zone. Oh, I'm going to overwork them so much. And with that, the basic needs of our zoo has been basically built, and we can start browsing for our first animal. And in this game, there's also a Zoopedia that gives you all the necessary land, water, other requirements for each animal, even the biome and group size they're comfortable with, so it's pretty easy. And after browsing quite a few options, I landed with the Nile Monitors. I figured they're the best to start with because, you know, they're cheap and have a habitat setup that isn't too complicated to follow. So I went shopping with the little money I have and got myself a super healthy Assad and himself a female friend, Atika. So I started building. It was kinda confusing at first, but I did get a layout I was happy with and introduced the first Senor Hyenas residents to their new home. Look how excited everyone is. With them inside the habitat, I could then look at their welfare and overall levels of happiness, alongside the necessary conditions to keep them living their best life. So I started terraining, going for the grassy mudland look, added a few smooth dirt humps and placed a body of water across it. Then headed off planting and trying out trees and plants to match the aesthetic. Apparently, Nile Monitors can get a bit picky about their vegetation, and so after some natural sprinkles of rocks, I had to paint on different types of terrains like soil and stone to further accommodate our animals to their natural habitat. And with a few more final touches to the habitat size, water bodies, and soil to grass ratio, I made an elevated viewing trail along the back of the enclosure for a little spice, and used windows to display the habitat to our earliest visitors. Using one of our vets, there's also an option to undergo vet researches on each of our animals. So using research centers, you can unlock things like enrichment items and bonuses. But before opening my zoo, don't forget that I'm money hungry, so I added a few donation bins right on the hotspots and put education boards to draw people in even more. On top of that, I placed an information center, balloon shop, and a snack shop right on the entrance to boost education and sales. The kids are going to love that, so it won't hurt to And then we were open. Before long, a crowd is already gathered around our lizards, and look at all the money we are getting. So now we have to keep our visitors in check and staying too. In this game, they give us a full overview on what our guests are thinking, so it'll be easier for us to know what is missing in our zoo. Right now, weirdly enough, it seemed their only concerns are mainly on drinks and the lack of umbrellas around. Fortunately, these are quite easy fixes, so I made a little park and offered our guests a source of Slurpees. And right after, quickly started laying down the barriers for our next habitat and looked through the Zoopedia for our next animal attraction. It has to be something sexy, majestic, truly unbelievable. Bongos. So yeah, they have these like super basic deers, or I don't know what the who family they fall into, but they're like super cheap, so like they'll have to do. We got a new parent to their habitat and quickly added them to the work zones, and figured out fencing the front would allow better guest viewing, and began experimenting with the water and terrain accordingly. These bongos, they like shorter grass, more soil, and very few trees, so I painted a few trails of dirt behind some greener patches and placed a little hut for them to make love and pump out babies. Putting habitat beddings like this would then solidify any structure in the habitat as their place to rest. After polishing the rest of the habitat with a dash of savanna and more trees, I called it done. And here a food tray for food. With 2 habitats, it seemed our zoo is off to a decent start, and we got more money completing a challenge and half getting 300 visitors and more sale profits left. But little did I know, my zoo is about to experience the biggest disaster imaginable. No, not the gulpy vending machine breaking, but a kid has lost his balloon. One crushed child under my supervision, and I will not let this happen again. But first, let me tell you my goals for the zoo, and let me explain the upcoming neglect later on in the video. Firstly, I want to pass 1,000 visitors on my zoo with at least $500,000 in my pockets. Also, some honorable animals I need in my zoo are the red pandas, because look, let's face it, who does not want a red panda? And also the Gemsbok, which I admit is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, and I don't really know why. Of course, also creating some beautiful habitats along the way, some that I'll be proud of. And another one is having produced at least one albino or leucistic offspring, which is basically white pigmented variants of the animals we can get during breeding. At the end of it all, we will see if the zoo survives the neglect, which will be basically just me increasing the speed of the game threefold, which is the mechanic you can use to go through the seasons quickly, but I'll use it for evil, and leaving it to run for over 15 minutes real time. So yeah, let's get to work. Just in time, in year 3 our first inspection report came through, and it seemed the ratings are just okay, except for education obviously. So I figured going for the apex predators next will teach fear into these children's brains. But to help satisfy our visitors more, I offered a big Bernie's bake shop and some more drinks to go alongside it. Oh, and our Bongo and Monitor research has also been completing a bunch of levels, so I invested on some better enrichment items for each of my animals just to make them a bit happier. Look at them playing in the rain and... oh. I lost track of time and did a little bit of decorating when out of nowhere my Nile Monitors hatched out a swarm of babies, like a lot of them. Even the Bongos themselves had bred, and they made a mini tiny little them. I added a toilet, some lights to brighten up my zoo a little bit, seats, and bins to reduce the trash levels. Before being disturbed by our new baby Bongo escaping and making a run, I had to pay a cash fee to bring this little rascal back and blocked whatever escape route it had. Look at it, not even a hint of guilt. And afterwards, I started researching diseases instead of my animals because I'm paranoid, before deciding to start building a place over my staff facilities because I want it pretty. Look at it now. We also finished up a few of our next challenges and made some cash. Oh, and yeah, I made this like lagoon extension for my Nile Monitors to give them more swimming space. And look at it, so smexy. But yeah, back to apex predators. I looked through a few options but wanted to keep the greener aesthetic, so I went with the Formoson black bears. I bought a pair of very fine looking bears and thought it would be cool if I go on a different route and create an inward KV glass viewing section for the guests, and I built its foundation. This is when I realized that barriers aren't so easy. So in the rain up until the morning, I ended up with this. And with the black bears in, we can start rocking the place up. I thought having a waterfall would be an excellent addition to the habitat, so I started shaping away any waterfall-y structures I could make and pushing in different types of rocks to add a natural feel. And more rocks. And some terrain painting. And more rocks. After getting a look I'm satisfied with, there are these water special effects you could add to simulate splashes of water rushing, and you pair a few of that down to a body of water and boom, you got yourself a waterfall. Enjoy this excellent view of my creation. How gorgeous. I weren't too satisfied with the trees in the bear habitat, so I scratched it all off, put on a few types of terrain bumps beforehand, and increased the habitat size even more. The trees that stuck with me in the end were a mix of these tall eucalyptus trees, smaller birch trees, and pine that I scattered throughout the cage. We added quite some rocks around the path, broken logs, and did this little nifty trick putting trees down into the ground to simulate foliage. Then the nature part of it was pretty much done. These bears are quite the climbers too, so I made a little parkour course and a KV nest for them to sleep. Letting me start year 7 with an inspection report that basically spat on our education levels. But hey, look at all our habitats getting 5 stars. To fix that problem, I placed a few education speakers on my habitats to get some teaching done. I also had a bit of power and staff room issue around, so I decided to expand our staff into the far left corner of the zoo. I had a bit of free time, so I got to decorating the entrance a little bit. I got this little lion statue spot for our guests to admire, and some lemurs like heading towards the toilet. I don't know. I'm trying my best here. I then made a second work zone specifically for people who deal with the animals and their habitats to organize our staffs a bit more, calling it the Habitat Folks. And not too long after, we finished all our Nile Monitors research, and we spotted our bears trying to sniff each other out with love. So what better way to celebrate than moving on to our next animal? Introducing the exhibits. It took a while for me to figure out a place to put these exhibits, but basically exhibits are small habitat cubes I could buy to showcase smaller animals like insects or amphibians. Doing so boosts our education without the hassle of creating our own habitat, as it creates one automatically. I laid down a new transformer to expand the electricity range on our zoo, and quickly started looking for our new critters after finding a perfect spot. Okay, Okay, first I got the glorious dart frogs to ever exist in the world. And the other one is, the Gila monsters. Gila actually means crazy in my language, which is perfect, I guess. And with the animal settled inside, it will instantly set it to look like the animal's environment. My job is to only change humidity and temperatures to their liking, and control population. Look at this little guy, all cozied up. And same goes for our monsters. You're so ugly. And by finally setting up the exhibit's education boards to their respective animals, it will totally help with the education. Before moving on, I took another quick look at our guest overview of our zoo, and there's what seemed to be a trash problem. So we got a gopi counter to help with the thirst, and hired another caretaker to sweep all the dirt away, before releasing a few Nile Monitors because they're reproducing like crazy. And it won't hurt to get a few conservation points. The Gemsbok. They're a type of oryx that just looks cool. It's like they have a mask on, and look at their horns, they're just... Anyways, this antelope is on my bucket list. Like, I literally named my car after them, so I wanted to make a cooler habitat. I dug out a landscape that goes inwards and smoothen it out. In this habitat, I wanted to experiment with null barriers, which are invisible barriers you could use to dictate a habitat without an actual wall. This allows me to use natural barriers like you will see later on and bring out my creative juices. In short, no more ugly wooden walls. I curved the viewing spot a little bit so it isn't too blocky, and with my habitat in the work zone, I spent no time releasing our Gemsbok because I want to see them in their glory. Well, it's a bit dark. Oh yeah, and I bought like 3 of them because I want more Gemsbok babies in the world. Sue me. Being South African, we sanded the whole enclosure to match the desert and scrublands of their original environment, and began blocking off the null barriers with the different desert rocks. It took a while, but I got a rock formation I was okay with, and the trees to match it. It went pretty much like this. The habitat looks so good, even visitors started asking me to increase ticket prices. But yeah, we placed the final touches, and the Gemsbok are finally official residents of our zoo. Well, while I was too busy building a new habitat, one of our amphibian friends has been at work making bebes, that is. Most of my poison frogs had low welfare, and it was because it had been reproducing so much that they had little space for each other. I mean, a good owner would probably expand them into new exhibits, but I thought storing them and quick selling them is probably more efficient. In fact, our bongos and bears are also experiencing some stress, and figured out that noise and space will become a growing problem as the number of visitors increases. With some of the extra money I made, we're 6 figures already, by the way, I placed a few conservation education boards around to help pump up education a bit more. And out of nowhere, we had something interesting happen to our Gemsboks. And just like that, a new baby bok born in the rain. And it was just in time finishing our researches, so I could put in more enrichment items for them. In fact, it was then when my dummy brain discovered all this time there was a mechanic research. So I quickly put our mechanics on power and staff facilities. And for our bongos, I thought it would be better if I put them on birth control with the option here to prevent overpopulating, because they were quite stressed. Or I could just release them, really. But on better news, on our year 11 inspection report, our education is no longer red. I wanted to work on a bigger habitat, like as big as this crater I made. Pretty cool, right? As a challenge, I went and made the entire thing out of null barriers, going for the open atmosphere. And started with a few healthy African wild dogs, splitting the habitat to both sandy savanna and a lively grassland. For surprise surprise, we added rocks to make the barrier again. This might be the longest time I spent on a habitat. First, I thought the habitat seemed perfect for a pack of African wild dogs, but while building I realized these dogs didn't seem like an upgrade from our previous animals, so I wanted to find a cooler pack of scavengers. So I replaced them with a pack of spotted hyenas. Much cooler, huh? I sold more frogs, released more Nile Monitors, and put our friends in their homes. And now we continue. And here we are, our hyena oasis. It was a bunch of looking for the right trees and looking for escape routes, but in the end, it was pretty much done. I was pretty proud of it. On the other side, there was a lot of our previous animals stressing because of the lack of hard shelters. So we built a few for our bongos and Gemsbok, and we expanded our water and electric sources to reach newer habitats. That didn't really work that well because some protesters aren't too happy with our bongos' well-being. So I tried compensating by adding a few decorations and lights. Even made this cozy, mysterious path on the side. Ooh, foreshadow. On a new habitat, all the visitors are enjoying a view of a pooping hyena in the dawn. And one of our key keepers had to take one of the hyenas out because of some alpha fighting that has been going on. But all in all, our zoo is shaping up pretty good. So I went straight to finding more animals and even did my own research on some. I mean, before getting distracted and doing a bunch of decorations and zoo maintenance, I swear this game is slowly making me love the true meaning of zookeeping. After looking through a few animal options that were okay, of course, I could have just picked the red pandas. Finally, I spent no time shaping up the barriers and creating whatever mountainish backdrop I could put to the side. I then bought our fuzzy friends and god, why are you so damn cute? I began blocking a few escape routes here and there and got their terrain distributions to their liking. I wanted to manually make a sort of climbing space for these pandas, so I first mapped out where I wanted my trees to build around. With my mixed bag of different colored trees, I added a few logs that would become the base point to my soon-to-be structure. Look at my pandas worshipping it already. But later on, I leaned on setting up 4 wood foundations myself and building around that. I added the floors, put over planks until I had a wall I liked, and copied them over, more walls, and a few more polishing up for putting a roof over the whole thing and the wood decking that supports it. Houses are confusing, man. With a cozy little home set for our pandas, I went and created a spiraling wooden trail upwards to our tree, attaching the whole thing to a nesting spot at the top, and gruelingly placed every single wooden sticks as its foundation. Why not? I'll also use a Panda Zoo blueprint to add a climbing spot. To spice things up, I spent another 30 minutes scattering bushes around the habitat and decorating the top railing of the viewing section to woo the guests, like these little squirrels romancing. And apparently it flew over my head that these guys live in colder climates, so with the help of a temperature map, a few coolers help regulating the temperature way down. Just like that goes my little pandas to the new habitat. Aww, my little wall glitcher. It's beautiful. There's nothing here at all that could go wrong. What? I didn't see that. But I'm glad our habitat's nice enough. It decided to jump back, so... More rocks, more trees. I figured I had more time before the neglect. And ooh, we've been making so much money. So what's stopping me from buying my next animal? Redford lemurs, red pandas, they're pretty much the same except one looks like But building their habitat was pretty much similar and we got both habitats looking really nice next to each other. They even have the same escaping rituals. I now have a little forest corner in my zoo and I can't be happier. I spent the rest of my years keeping up with the zoo maintenance and expanding my staff facilities that are not too efficient yet. And wait, what was that? So I was too focused making the homes of my furry friends that I didn't realize the birth of an albino Gemsbok. I don't believe it. I mean, it could be leucistic, which is a white pigmentation like albinos, but instead of red eyes, they maintain their normal eye color. But at the end of the day, it's white, and that's another goal scratched off the bucket list. Look at it yelping and running around. I will raise you, my child. I did as much fixing I can do to keep the best conditions for my animals before the neglect, and even release a few daddy boks to keep my little special Gemsbok healthy. No favoritism here, guys, I swear. Oh, and I named him Oddball. Don't question it, okay, I love it. But that really did nothing, by the way, because out of all my Gemsbok, my Oddball, only him was contracted with a life-threatening disease of salmonellosis. Planet Zoo's really out here testing me. So I boxed him and my trusty vets quickly rushed him into the veterinary, and all I could do was pray. However, in our lemur side, things took a more happier turn because they're already having babies. Two. All these babies. And all the lemurs seem pretty happy to me. Now we're coming up on neglecting our zoo. I know. Right before neglect, I fixed up any facilities I could and hire a bunch of new staff to go around. Also, food and drink shouldn't be that much of a problem now. And without much notice, year 25 had already crept up on us. That's not a message you want to see before the neglect. During this period, around 2 years will pass without any of my interference, and we'll see if my zoo is strong enough to maintain balance. And yeah, it's pretty possible for a good zoo to not even have any issues. So I set the speed to max and let the timer roll down. So not much happened after all. My animals are healthy, my zoo's looking more gorgeous than ever, and I've checked out every single thing on my list. For the first 25 years of my zoo, I wouldn't see it anything else other than a success. Well, except... Well, one last time, I let time fly by on my zoo and walked away from my keyboard. Thanks for watching, bye!